I appreciated you reaching out to me, and I figured since I was pretty vitriolic when speaking to you in the form of video, it would be a good counterbalance to be somewhat less vitriolic when talking to you directly. Um,
I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. So it was pretty recent, so I'm sure people in chat recall the sort of disagreements that I had. But you reached out to me and wanted to talk, and now we're talking. So how are things going?
Things are good. I mean, I've been working on other projects, but I've been very interested in my own line of work and how I feel about it. And it was when I was working on a video regarding Buddhism, there was the idea came up of like right livelihood and how one kind of thinks about their work and is it considered sort of a compassionate activity. And I felt like I have a sort of all of us do a sort of like edutainment kind of role being played. Like it's information, but it's also like kind of people put it on in the background. There's um, entertainment also. And I was kind of I do care about politics quite a bit, and I was kind of wondering in my own position, what are sort of the limitations with how online politics are right now, that maybe people, like specifically the audience, should be aware of. And this was not, addressed specifically to streamers. I know that it's because the second video I want to do is called "The Revolution Will Not Be Uploaded." I kind of want to do a sort of the reaction to this, but I do think just in general the online format there were certain limitations that um, kind of lead to a lack of real political action. So I tossed that video out. I was expecting some sort of response. I felt like a lot of the criticisms, like despite the vitriolic nature of your like reaction, I thought you still raised some valid critiques. And at the end of the day, I take responsibility in the form of if I'm not communicating my point properly, that's on me, and I need to further refine my arguments and talk to other people, and hopefully, maybe I'll come away with a different opinion, a better view, something closer to the truth. And it's kind of turned into me talking to multiple different streamers, like and academics, also trying to kind of further figure out how do other people feel about this? How do other people feel about the sort of the extent to which this space can actually lead to political action. So I guess that's the context of why I made that video, and also why I wanted to reach out. And I do appreciate like the response also in having me on.
Well, yeah, of course. No, it's always something I'm happy to talk about. I feel like you said you were going to do a follow-up video called "The Revolution Will Not Be Uploaded," which I guess kind of puts to bed one of the frustrations I have, where I feel like to a lot of people there's this presumption of unproductivity behind live streaming that they don't attribute to non-live streamed uh content, but that doesn't seem to be the case here, I guess. I think I think that there is a as lefties, we tend to have very high opinions of ourselves intellectually, especially when compared to our opposition. It's not like fascists know what the they're on about, right? So comparatively, we know a lot more. And as a consequence of that, we tend to think that we're above certain modes of engagement. And there's always this like, well, the proper revolutionary would do this, or the proper advocate would do that. And I think often it's kind of misguided. Political relevancy is largely up to our willingness to get down in the dirt and engage with the mediums that people actually pay attention to, whether that be YouTube or TikTok or whatever else. We're not all Trotskyites like handing pamphlets out at a street corner. We need to be where people are. And that comes with its own pitfalls, but it's also, I think, a prerequisite to victory. So I guess I want people to be a little more proud of the engagement they get into through those mediums, because that is how we will make a difference.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And also like I was fully aware that I was kind of engaging in that age-old antagonism of uh, video essayists and debate bros or streamers. It was like a provocative kind of packaging of the video that was kind of supposed to elicit some sort of response. And I think that also, it unfortunately took away from the actual content a little bit. And I could see, like, if you have someone's face on, if you have your face on a thumbnail, and it seems to be a video criticizing your job and stuff. I mean, it makes sense that there would be an antagonistic approach to it. But yeah, I'm not particularly like fond of the. I don't think video essayists and debate bros are that different.
We all agree on the fundamentals, if nothing else. Yeah, so I guess when you envision, like, the left engaging in politically efficacious behavior and making a difference, I mean, how do you envision that taking place?
Do you mean like in the real world or in the digital space?
I don't think there's a
Because
meaningful distinction.
okay. Um, I would argue that the one meaningful distinction would be the tangible fact that this is like communication, and there could be a bridge between the digital and the real world. But I would argue like there is a distinction between online politics. If that's I mean, there's overlap, but there's also a distinction. If it, does that would you agree or?
Oh, when it comes to advocacy, I mean, any mechanism for communication, it all seems to fit in the same sort of blanket to me, right? I mean, if you're engaging with somebody online and trying to convince them of this, that, the other, making an argument, I don't think there's that much of a difference fundamentally between going to a local meeting or a town hall or whatever and making that argument. I mean, fact is, most people get their news from some form of media, right? Not in-person engagement. If it's not the internet, it's TV. But lefties don't exactly have free access to television as a medium for sharing our ideas.
I guess okay. Maybe this is more useful because I think they're very attached, but it's like along the pipeline, and there would still be a feedback, but it would be the initial. Like I find it very important the information, knowledge, and discourse that happens like online, in town halls, etc. And then there is like a kind of translating that into action later on. I mean, your like the canvassing event, the progressive victory, for example. That's like
Aw,
an
you did
example of
research.
you know, try my best. But like I guess yeah. So I guess I could try to answer that in terms of the entire process of how the left functions. Is I would like to see, I guess, on in terms of first the discussion in the discourse in the left, the more of the theory or like media related aspect of it, which is I do think is important, and it's the ground on which like action and praxis is like established, is needs-based communication over kind of pointing out complicity and injustices and kind of perceived wrongness in others. That would be my kind of gripe with how politics is discussed in the left, in left-leaning circles, both online and offline. I don't think it's entirely productive. And I guess that was the point that was being raised with regards to deference politics in the video. But I also think deference politics does have a critical role, but it's I feel like a lot of the time people stop at that and then they don't continue with like offering some sort of constructive um, feedback, or trying to translate it into like, okay, well, what can we do?
So what would a continuation be to you? Because that to me, I feel like people on the left often very correctly gesture at that. Knowing something is one thing, doing something with it is another. The problem is that like if you take a look at like who's actually willing to put what they know into practice, it's the right, the right will. The right will go online and get radicalized, with a bunch of ludicrous fear-mongering nonsense, and then they'll go and do a bomb threat or show up at a PTA meeting and scream about how trans people are raping children or whatever. That action serves to benefit them, of course, because they're lunatics and anti-life. But that is what they need to do to win, because for them, winning is about terror and intimidation and violence. So if since that obviously isn't our preferred mechanism for getting our point across, at least my impression is that it's not, um, we have to think of other ways to affect meaningful change. And I try to throw people on out there when it comes to like canvassing and voting and what have you. I do think those things are important. A lot of people on the left, not only don't, but seem to think it's actively detrimental, which I think is extremely misguided. I mean, what does it look like to you moving on up?
Um, in terms of like translating it into action,
Yeah.
or oh yeah. So I think I'll just say like at the base level in a very simple way. Like I think that it should involve like specific channels of um, where there's issues at like local political levels where people can literally just like influencers can use their influence to direct people to specific organizations or areas that are they can organize, they can volunteer, they can send money to. People already do that. That's not it's not definitely not saying that that doesn't happen. But at least what I observe is that the extent to which that happens, in comparison to the amount of influence influencers have, it could be happening a lot more. And I think it's limited by sort of the drama or sort of like a squabbling I think that goes on that is apparent in streaming circles with video essayists. Um, and I think more generally, there's I came across this idea while I was trying to like figure out this new video, but Sartre, like his idea of like seriality, where you have like he noticed there was a lot of like leftist groups that just had general grievances, and they were kind of fighting for the same thing, but there wasn't a lot of organization. And he came up with like the idea of seriality, where it's in like a shared social space. There's lots of actors going towards specific goals, and it sometimes looks like collective action, but it's not quite like organized. And there's this scarcity mentality where they are all at the end of the day trying to fight for a specific resource. So I think online, especially content creators that are on the left, the resource that they're fighting for would be attention. There's a scarcity of attention, and you have to capture that. Um, and Sartre proposes I mean, to kind of give an example of this in the real world would be like rioting, where there's a lot of actors that are, you know, they're there for somewhat the same reason, like a general grievance or a general issue with something, but each individual agent doesn't really, their goals don't really align, and there is like a general um, kind of mess. And I think online a good example of that is like when characters like Andrew Tate emerge. It's almost like a riot like energy on the left where everybody wants to like get their punches in and everything as they should. But to the extent to which that's constructive, there is a point where people start, I think, repeating lines and repeating things, and that's where I think there's a lot of wasted energy and attention. And then Sartre proposes group praxis, which is kind of the end of this scarcity mentality. And it's where, despite certain differences and grievances, and it's going to sound very cliche, that there is still some sort of like general organization uh, amongst a group of people that they're working towards. Um, so that's like very like kind of abstract, but I also don't think it's like a super absurd proposal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like some people would interpret this as collusion, but I think it's just like a very basic level of cooperation. The incentive structures online are naturally competitive, even for people within the same political circle. Like you said, attention is a scarce resource that people fight over. Even when people get along with each other, like in a social sense, yeah, you got content creators who are friends with each other. Obviously, the first person to put out a video on a given subject is going to get a boost in attention for it. Like, there's always an adversarial element to the relationship, which is unfortunate. It happens to the right too. It's a little inevitable. Um, I think I think what I'm trying to strive for with the canvassing stuff is the idea that you have to stress modes of engagement that are non-adversarial by nature. The progressive victory stuff, for example, doesn't like really serve to benefit me or anyone. I mean, it does maybe like for attention. Like you can say, oh, I helped so and so with the canvassing, but generally speaking, it's not as beneficial to the bottom line metrics as like putting out a video would be, which directly, it sort of enriches me through monetization. Um, by hamping on the non-adversarial stuff, you have the ability to, I guess, promote positive engagement in ways you wouldn't get out otherwise. But even then, this is a tough sell for a lot of online lefties, you know? Go and canvas for Democrats. I mean, to a lot of these people, it's like you're asking them to, you know, watch their wife get fucked in front of them. They don't want to be pro Biden warriors, fun as it might be. I have so much trouble getting people to move in the direction of pragmatism in this space. You know, they think it's cuckoldry.
Yeah, I mean that's why I'm very much advocating for the idea of like needs-based communication where, you know, it's difficult to kind of sway people that are a lot more like more extreme left leaning, like I mean the Bernie or bust crowd, and you know it's difficult because it's so entrenched in certain political beliefs, and those political beliefs are attached to certain figures online, and there is like a maybe not necessarily a cult of personality, but like these people will not change their positions at all. And I think like it's less, you know, it's less exciting unless you're gonna have less engagement, but talking about things in terms of like, you know, what needs to be done in like 2024, for example. There's that document or that whatever the hell that was that the I don't know if it was Republicans exactly, but some sort of organization about their kind of plans, like
Yeah, 2025.
to yeah, like that's a you know I think most I would argue almost everybody on the left, unless you're like a accelerationist or something, like you're going to your needs are not going to be met by kind of doing this Bernie or bust sort of like that should be a rallying kind of thing that everyone could point towards, regardless of your you know leftist leanings. I would think, and I think like approaching things from that angle, and then we can talk about okay, well, what's something that is pragmatic and could be achievable right now. I mean, I'm Canadian, so I don't have great insight
Whoa!
into U.S. politics.
Didn't
Yeah,
warn
yeah.
me beforehand. My God.
There's a little trigger warning right there. So,
Jesus.
um,
You know, as an American engaged in politics, that really is always like the, you know, it's the getting blindsided by that so often. It's rough for us, you
yeah.
know?
Well, it's rough for us too. You guys are very loud, even when we want to pay attention to our own politics. It's hard to hear it
And
over
really, you're,
the.
you're saying Americans adversely affect Canadian political discourse and media? You say it ain't so. I ain't heard that before. Yeah,
It's
sorry
just
about that.
it's very tiring. Yeah. But just to finish my point, like I would argue that like a pragmatic thing would be yes to you'd go and vote for Biden, you'd like or vote for whoever the I mean within reason, but whoever the Democrats put in for now, well you're able to like organize, like continue doing your more like radical reformations and stuff, but you know that's like an immediate thing that probably needs to be addressed. Um, and I think that the only way that communication can happen online is in terms of like needs-based discourse and that kind of getting rid of that scarcity mentality that I think leads to just a lot of people trying to get their own and get their own engagement and dunking on other people and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I contribute to this to an extent. I want to fight with people less. I've gotten pretty defensive over the years because I'm sure you've heard rumors. I have a slightly contentious reputation that usually poisons the well long before I actually talk to a person directly. Meaning that there's usually a presumption of mutual hostility, which is in many cases projected by me, and it's one of those self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Like if you come at everything like it's a conflict waiting to happen, then it will be. That's guaranteed now. Um, so that's not great. Um, I'd like to move past that. I mean, there's a lot of good work to be done. Despite a lot of doomerism that's been circling around right now, I actually think we're poised pretty well for a victory in 2024. And the direction the Biden admin has taken with regards to unionization, you know, this is like more of an America specific thing, but let's be real here. A defeat of conservatives in America is a defeat for conservatives everywhere, right? We are like the focal point for all politics, basically. Like it's international in its consequences. So I think we're well positioned. I would like the left to be in a position where they're able to kind of culturally take advantage of positive movement, you know, not isolate themselves from mechanisms of power, but rather be in place to take credit for good things that happen. Um, but I don't know. I feel like the online left has moved further from that. Like, when was the last time a big leftist YouTuber came up and up? BreadTube isn't really a thing anymore, and there are big lefty YouTubers, but like a fresh one, you know. Adam something got big after me. I mean, I know he watched my content before something, and he's quite large, but I don't know. I wonder if this is all getting folded into like the TikTok space, or maybe if there's just less of a market for being lefty and more of a market for either being sort of politically disaffected populist or just being like a social democrat who likes Biden. I don't know where people go from here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's like I think there's maybe a little bit of apathy or confusion, which is I think that's what
No
I'm trying
direction.
to focus on. Yeah, yeah, and I mean that's what I'm trying to focus on. It goes back to I think that seriality where it's a lot of people working generally towards kind of the same thing, but not really, and not enough organization. But I just wanted to go back to the when you were talking about like your interactions online, and especially like the emails we had. You like you mentioned some regret in your tone because a lot of your um, activity online is inherently antagonistic or unfriendly, and it was somewhat of a surprise. And that made me I felt kind of bad because I would say most of my interactions online are pretty positive. I'm in a different space, and I would just like to, if you could elaborate on that observation, like a little bit, and just your experience with that,
With what specifically?
with negative, like the kind of vitriolic or negative, kind
Oh
of
yeah, sorry.
interactions online. Yeah, yeah.
Momentary brain blip. Yeah, I think that a lot of people on the left kind of treat this space online as a social space primarily. So if you don't like a person interpersonally, it the political advocacy kind of dies there. Infighting and drama is everywhere. I mean, with the ousting of Kevin McCarthy just a couple of days ago, it's pretty clear that even at the highest levels of power, the Republicans aren't immune to it. But I think that a lot of it in our space has to do with that social space conflation. The idea that I might be personally unsavorable and therefore not a worthwhile political ally. Something that I don't believe. There are lots of people on the left who I consider to be personally distasteful, but I'm still willing to work with them on some shared marginal goal or interest. Like there's something of value to push for there. And that's not always fun or cool or whatever, but it is how we win. And in the absence of that shared assumption, I guess, it feels like the lunch table politics assumption is also self-fulfilling, where if you see everyone operating on the assumption that it's really just whether or not you personally like or dislike someone, you fight, you bicker, you disengage, whatever. That's the whole name of the game. It kind of guarantees that it's always going to play out that way, which is unfortunate. I feel like I should make an effort to move away from that, but I don't know what deliberate actions I could take to do so. Because you can't just start reaching out to people and be like, "Oh, I know that there was a previous assumption of mutual antagonism, but I'm now happy to work with your audience." And I'm talking to somebody who doesn't even do any kind of outreach, so there's not even like a mechanism by which that can happen. It feels like a virtue signal.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is a good step because this was like maybe an initially antagonistic interaction online that I don't think is like developed into anything worse. So I do think people in general they can if they're good faith, it'll be exposed that they're bad faith if you actually have a genuine discussion with them, or maybe you guys can reach some sort of consensus. And I was curious because you said like in the email also it's your audience tends to like send content that looks like that video essays that are like dunking on debate bros, kind of like the optics of it was especially like that's what that video looked like. Do you like how do you feel about like your kind of audience's expectations in terms of how you engage with the content that you're reacting to?
I mean, there have been plenty of cases where people clearly want me to just tear into a video and I just ignore it. I try not to let the audience's expectations taint my perception too much. I mean, obviously, it's not completely avoidable. We're all social creatures. No man is an island. Blah blah. Um, but I try not. I try to like internally correct for that to the best of my abilities. Obviously, even if my decision making is like purely self controlled, like even if I'm fully on the ball when it comes to what I believe and how I handle what I believe and all that crap, there's still the problem that like there's a selection bias in the content that's actually shown to me, right? Where the audience will still like maybe disproportionately show me certain types of content. A good example of this is black separatists. I think that a big problem that we have in the left is that we're very unwilling to acknowledge or deal with reactionary thought when it comes from minorities. Um, this isn't a big problem in the sense of like it, anti-white racism is equal to anti-black racism, whatever, some stupid horseshit like that. It's nothing like that. It's just a failure in our consistency and our ability to think through these problems. And as we can see in some cases, it really bites us back because you have people like, was it Nick Cannon, or Kanye, who says stuff that initially gets picked up by a lot of people, especially black people, who are like, oh, well, this is actually like super based or whatever. And then it goes down a little while, like it runs down the road a little bit. And then it's like, oh, holy shit, wait, this was actually just like fascist ideology, like masquerading as left leaning because it was coming from a member of a minority group until it reaches a point of obviousness where like no one can ignore it. So I think that's an issue. It's not the biggest issue that we face, not even close. But because it's an issue and it's something that other people tend not to go over, people would throw me a lot of videos being like, hey, here's like a black lefty who's saying some shit that's pretty obviously anti-white. And I look at the video and like, it is? But if you look at 5 or 6 videos of that, congrats, now your channel is the like anti-white racism patrol watch channel, where it's like there's like a million other problems that are way more impactful and meaningful. And you look at those and it's like, ah, well, but I have this like backlog of this very specific issue that people want me to go over. So that's also something that you really have to work through. That was a big thing with misandry as well. Like, how much systemic sexism do men face? Very, very little, I feel. Interpersonally, some, maybe, but like it's not really comparable. But a lot of the sexist shit that you hear against men from left-leaning women is basically just turf rhetoric that's very slightly disguised. You hear a lot of stuff about like the innate brutish violence that men pose, and a lot of these people end up becoming turfs down the line. It's like, well, how could we have seen this coming? Well, of course they did, because all of their rhetoric was like insanely essentialist from the get-go. It was like there was always a warning sign. So anyway, yeah, what I'm rambling about here, I guess, is the importance of like responsibly cultivating content from the get-go, even if you feel your positions are consistent. The extent to which you commit to a given topic says a lot.
Yeah, no, I was gonna actually ask you about that. Like, do you feel like like what you react to in terms of these kind of niche, um, kind of novel, but potentially radical or threatening, like topics? Do you think it's like proportionate to the actual threat of them? Do you think that maybe the best thing to do is to like you could still cover them, but then like make sure, for example, if you had like a black separatist on, you gave that a lot of attention. I mean, because that is a very like it'll drive a lot of engagement. It's a very like specific issue that or topic that a lot of people aren't really like talking
And
about.
it's
Um,
scandalous, and it's like, it doesn't get
mhm.
discussed that much, and it blows out. And then like other people, like well-meaning lefties, will be like, wow, how dare you criticize this black woman in this position or whatever. And then it's like, now it's a whole thing. I do think it's a real weakness in our thinking. We have to be vigilant for reactionary thought no matter where it comes from. But again, it's always like a disproportionate focus thing, right? Because it's like the gamer gators. Like, were you around on the internet back in like 2014 or whatever?
I mean, like yeah, loosely like I didn't really follow any of that, but I'm kind of aware of it.
That's good. Yeah, you would have. So there were some people on that side of things where they would like, how do I say? There were some female YouTubers at the time who were just kind of doing shitty anti-male sexism. They were marginal and they weren't that loud, like they weren't loud at all. Their channels were quite small. But what these gamergator channels would do is they would hyper fixate on them. You'd have channels with 500,000 subs going after channels with 10K subs, being like, this is the problem with modern feminism or whatever, and just go on and on. And it doesn't matter how right you are in a given criticism, because a component of correctness is the implied severity of another person's incorrectness. And an overfixation on a minor problem can be just as dishonest as an initially wrong take to begin with. Certainly with regards to like social harm, getting 500,000 people to believe that there's some legitimate threat of feminazis destroying masculinity forever, even if it's framed through a criticism of a definitely wrong YouTuber, even if the criticisms are correct, that's more socially harmful than the initial misinformation was.
Do you think in terms of like kind of as you said responsibly cultivating content, if you were to give attention to kind of like a sort of radical reactionary you know people that they belong to a specific minority group, then a sort of responsible, constructive thing to do in terms of proportion would then to be really try to then cover like other minorities or something like that you kind of agree with their positions. They're not like radical and I'm can't I don't know how I would give a specific example, but still platforming kind of like a specific like black issues, for example, that are really important to be like, okay, guys, that was I don't agree with this. Like this is something that is it could be harmful. And we've given enough attention to this, and now we could kind of talk about something more constructive. So it's not just kind of a deconstruction of like something kind of radical niche. It could potentially grow into something worse, but like overall, it's not maybe proportionate.
Yeah, I don't want to do the thing where it's like, now that we've criticized this bad black person, let's bring on a good black or whatever. Let's balance it out. Like, here we
Yeah,
took this
I
guy.
mean in
And
terms of covering issues,
yeah,
not
yeah,
specifically
in the
using people.
broader
Mhm.
discourse, I think a good initial thing to hit it with is never frame it as like the left going too far. When something like crops up in that line, or I have a disagreement with what I consider to be reactionary ideology, I never frame it as or think of it as like the left has gone too far. I frame it as like, well, this is reactionary ideology. And I think that difference is critical, because if you frame it in that way, you don't run the risk of having a group of audience members who think that I'm like one of the good lefties by being willing to, quote, call out that bullshit on their side. There's always a big risk, and you're in trouble when this happens, which is when, like, if you correctly criticize a person on the left and then you see a bunch of conservatives being like, "Heh, based, you got him," and it's like, whoa, you're worse, get away from me. So a good way to avoid that is to, like, not frame it as internal fighting or like infighting or whatever, but rather as like an identification of these tendencies. But you also have to compensate by appropriately framing these issues. So, like, for example, somebody in chat just pointed out, I had a much discussed disagreement with a black woman on the treatment of white South Africans, which has been litigated endlessly in the years since. But after that conversation, I talked with a land back activist, an indigenous woman, and we had a really good conversation. And I think that to a lot of the people in my audience gave them like a pretty positive impression of what the politics at least potentially are. Like what they can be in good framing.
Well, yeah, no, I mean that specifically addressed, I guess, what I was more abstractly talking about. So that's yeah, that's it. I mean, it sounds like you have been responsibly cultivating your content. Um, I guess I'm wondering how what was the sort of like frame of mind when you were more like entrenched in a lot of interpersonal drama and interpersonal conflict with people? Was there like an apparent change or shift in your attitude towards the sort of needs and intentions you have behind your platform?
Yeah, I thought that initially I could do this like super ultra rational, like, I will pull the left in the correct direction, and I will, like the woke scolds or whatever, like, I will outdo them, I will show the superiority of my beliefs, blah 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 blah. And I thought that but of course it doesn't work that way. The deliberately antagonistic engagement actually pulls people away more than it does towards me, and you end up getting a lot of audience members who come away with a negative impression of the left broadly, which I do not want. Even if I, as a proper good leftist, think that the left is full of idiots, and sickos. Like, obviously all good leftists believe this about their own side. That's not like the outward impression that I want to get. Like, infighting should not be door number one, you know to getting involved in left matters. That should be something that you partake in like a fine wine when you're already well associated with the left. You have to get off on the correct foot, from the get-go. And now, I guess, I mean, I still get into fighting a lot. I try not to engage with it as much. Like, there's a lot of left YouTubers who dislike me. It's basically just a list of all left YouTubers. And I try not to exacerbate negative discourse or whatever. I guess I kind of privately hope that one day they'll be open to talking, and maybe it can be one of those, we don't have to like each other, but maybe we could like do an audience drive or something. But if that's ever going to happen, it's going to take a while, because there's a lot of bad blood there.
How does that just, I mean, maybe it's a bit more of a personal question, but how does that like feel on like an emotional level when you feel like you're like engaged politically in a responsible way, and a lot of people are antagonistic towards you, and I mean, or like, do you feel like you're not being treated fairly, or you're being misrepresented or misunderstood?
Um, yeah, it's pretty frustrating, but I try not to complain about it too much because for the most part, like realistically speaking, this career, as much as it carries frustration, has catapulted me to a degree of success that I would never have dreamed of when I graduated with my sociology degree. So, as frustrating as it is, like keeping things in perspective, it's okay. Like the suffering is balanced out well with a lot of love and positive favors and YouTube AdSense revenue. So I don't want to be super doomer about it. I do think that like it is very frustrating to be misunderstood, and every once in a while I get these like very jarring experiences where I'll see somebody out in the wild, like on Twitter or whatever, who dislikes me, and they will dislike me with a passion that I reserve for the love I feel for a partner. Like their hatred towards me exceeds the feelings that I have towards most anything in my life. I don't understand their passion. And in addition to the passion, like they have no clue what's going on. Like they don't know, like they'll like talk about drama, but they'll misrepresent it. Like they'll factually not get critical elements of it correctly. You know what I mean? Like it seems like they feel very strongly about something they have very scant knowledge of. And when I think of like, well, how do I feel about that? I don't know. I think that in a lot of cases, and I don't want to sound like patronizing when I say this, but I really do believe it. In a lot of cases, I think I feel a little bit bad for them, maybe, because a lot of them seem to be, if we're talking tendencies here, a lot of them are young. A lot of them are very politically disaffected. They feel helpless and powerless. A lot of them are probably much worse off than I am, economically and socially. And they direct their powerlessness towards a small online social space where they can feel like an insider by sharing the opinions of others on social issues, like their opinions towards me. And again, like I don't want to like patronize or whatever, but I do think that really sucks. And I guess I just hope that through me or through some other mechanism, they're able to engage with this stuff in a more healthy way. Like if they could phone bank or canvas or something with a quarter of the passion they have towards disliking me, not only would they get more done like in a real politics sense, but I feel like it'd be a lot better for them emotionally. That's all I want.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the essence of the video I made, was that there's an insane amount of passion and emotion and attention that goes into the interpersonal bickering, I guess. And I mean, there are genuinely serious things that also happen in these spaces. There's like genuine harassment and assaults and stuff like that. And it's not to minimize it, but it is like if everybody is honestly like a good faith actor and they do care about kind of certain main goals in leftist politics, you I would hope that they could somehow channel that energy or passion into constructive dialogue at the very least, and also hopefully like actual political action.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, it would do a lot better. It would do a lot better for them as well. It's something I'd like to put to rest, ideally. Obviously, it's not really possible because if you dislike a person, then everything they have to say gets framed in a negative light. Like if I say, "Oh, I'd like to put all this to bed and get along with people," or like, I may feel wronged by this disagreement, but that doesn't matter. We're going to work together on this. For a lot of people, it's like, he is snakishly trying to avoid culpability for his crimes by presenting a front of positivity. And it's like, there's no winning with those presumptions on hand. People will kind of go with it no matter what. So I guess in the meantime, I'm gonna try to instigate that a little less or be a little bit less participatory with it, and try to focus on being a better example. I think that's ultimately like the way you have to be, right? It's about being a good example. Um, I have a lot of respect for some YouTubers who I know for a fact dislike me but never talk about it because I feel like, I mean, there must be some clout in speaking negatively about me, but they have to like, I feel like they're biting their tongue because they want to like focus on being the better example. Like they don't want their engagement online to be defined through antagonism, even if they don't really care for me. And I respect the hell out of that. Not just like in a oh thanks for not bothering me kind of way, but also in like you know that's a lot of restraint. You know that's a lot of like clout you're potentially leaving on the table for what? You know? Well, I guess for like principle, that's pretty cool. You know? So I guess I'll try to do that a little.
Yeah, like I guess, like, do you feel like there are certain things that are holding you back from kind of reaching out to people or trying to repair bridges?
Well, a lot of them
Yeah,
have
like
me
like
blocked, so that's definitely
okay, so there's literal barriers in some way. But for the people that don't have you blocked, I guess.
oh, I mean, I think it's just about giving people good headlines to latch onto, right? I used to do charity streams more often. I want to get back into that. Like I raised like 300K for Palestinian children. Um, and I saw there were people online where it's like, oh, well, you know, maybe you hate the guy, but you got to give him credit for that. Pretty difficult to hate a person off of a headline like that. And then that's kind of like an opening line. You know what I mean? Where you can be like, okay, well, despite our many personal disagreements, or despite like this or that the other, clearly there's something we care about together. You know, we don't like Gaza being bombed into dust. So let's put a pin in this. Maybe we hate each other, sure, but can we work together on, I don't know, raising funds for crap like this, or at least indicating we're willing to do stuff like that? And if you can, then that's kind of the problem fixed, right? Because you don't need to be friends with people. You just need to be able to work together for shared political expediency.
Do you feel like it's the kind of expectations of headlines or what, like, your audience will say, what other people's audience will say, what other creators will say, that maybe leads to some hesitation in reaching out? Or is it just a kind of, you're you are actively reaching out, like you're willing to actually like repair some relationships?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there's certainly a few people that I can think of in the left space that I would rather be on positive terms with. Contra, for example, I feel like her dislike of me came out of nowhere, but you know that's how it is. The ability to potentially mobilize these spaces in a way that they're not currently is very valuable politically. I mean, forming some kind of you know unified block would be worth, I guess, reaching out or trying to engage. Um, though for a lot of people, you also don't want to engage because I think some of the mutual dislike is very warranted. Like there are some people who like it's kind of like a time and attention sink. You really don't want to put a bunch of effort in trying to get along with them because in reality they're sort of just not great people. And it's always
Hmm.
tough to know where that line is too. A lot of people would say that about me, which probably fuels the presumption they shouldn't engage with me either. Um, So yeah, I don't know. Coalition building is really it's really difficult. But I guess I'll try to do some more positive stuff. I mean, we're coming in like a year before the election, which means it's time for more fundraising, it's time for more phone banking, it's time for more canvassing and donations and stuff. And the more aggressively um I push for stuff like that, I think the easier it is for people to see the sort of marginal value in working together, at least so we don't all get killed in death camps uh, by the Republicans. That's a
Right.
thing I don't want to happen personally.
Hmm. Just to go back, like when you mentioned Contra, for example, I don't really know much about the drama, but it's interesting. Like you said, it came out of nowhere, like her antagonism towards you. Do you feel like it's like a if it's a misunderstanding or just kind of a random kind of just vitriolic treatment of you? Like, do you think that would warrant, at least if you want that relationship to be maintained or repaired, like it seems reasonable to just like reach out if it just seems like it was a random kind of I don't know if you had before, but something like that, because I think for them at least it might be difficult to want to repair relationships if it doesn't seem like the other party is um, supportive of even like trying to understand why there was some antagonism. Like if they're what they're saying is just, oh, I don't, it came out of nowhere why they disliked me. I mean, maybe it did. I don't know the exact situation.
Yeah, in that case specifically, I think it was like a friend of a friend kind of deal because she had a friend who attacked me and then sexually harassed me on Twitter, and then I argued with her, and then Contra took the side of her friend. Um, there's it's very difficult to like break those lines as well because if you have it's like if there's one person who dislikes you is like one thing, but if you have like a network of sort of loosely connected friends or at least like business partners or people who are in a shared space who dislike you, it's really difficult to like where do you put a foot in on that? You know what I mean? Like where like at what point do you step in or like what's like the wedge issue that you can try to get some positivity going on in there? There are a few people who won't talk to me publicly, but who do talk to me privately, which I also respect, because maybe there's like it's unviable to engage in a public forum, but you can still indicate some degree of solidarity or shared consideration in private. I think it really is like a case by case basis. Yeah, I don't know how I would handle it like on principle. I don't know if I have like a general strategy. Um,
Mm.
so I guess I would just have to handle it with people individually. Be nice to get along. I went to VidCon recently, and Contra was doing a panel there. I didn't show up because I had a feeling my presence there would be interpreted as like mean mugging or whatever. Like like I am here, I am watching you, or some like psychotic Gamergate tier shit like that. When in reality, I just would have wanted to go to the panel. Um,
So
so
like there, for example, like do you feel like it's expectations of how other people perceive you that kind of limits like your own needs, like which is like maybe to bridge this relationship or something like that.
a lot of people do think that my audience is like psychotically like super vitriolic and harassing and doxing or whatever, which is just silly. My audience is full of gay trans weirdos, which is sort of uh picture perfect representation of the online left broadly as an aggregate, the median online lefty. Um, fine people. So if people like perceive some initial threat, obviously it'll increase the likelihood that they're like initially defensive or won't want to get engaged. Or people will think, oh well, he's being nice now, but if ever anything negative happens with him, he'll turn the dogs on me, and then like it'll be 6 months of protracted drama. So it's, there are institutional and social barriers. I understand why they exist. I don't necessarily fault people who dislike me for their existence. It's just a slow process of unwinding a few knots.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess um it would be just initially uncomfortable no matter what, because there are going to be lots of people that are going to say whatever, they're going to have certain sort of expectations about your actions. But like I would hope that if like you're acting in good faith, you want to repair the relationship, that eventually that would kind of dissipate. And like I do think that there is just a general like the uh, might not work with the limitations of this platform, but there is a general kind of guiding principle when it comes to repairing relationships, which is like listening to people, and not in the form of like video essay and then a reaction to a video essay and then, but just like actually talking, or some sort of genuine like live discourse. And it doesn't need to be monetized or anything like that. Like I do think in general in any relationship, um, I'm not a huge fan of this, and I'm seeing it more, especially on the left online. Is just like I will not talk to this person at all. I will not. This person is like literally like a demonic or evil in some way, and it's like they've said this without actually attempting to engage in any sort of dialogue with them to begin with, which I feel is like that's you're going to get a raw and hopefully honest dialogue if both parties are being like like honest about what they're doing. But I feel like it's most of these interactions are people pointing out the perceived wrongness of the other person and how they're complicit in injustice, and they're not talking about specifically how they feel about this, and the other person's not actually like listening, I think.
No, 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 yeah, for sure. I agree. I think like there has to be like a very strong or specific or well demonstrated reason to just not want to talk to someone like at all. Um the unwillingness to engage with people even in like okay, well I have issues with you, but here's this or here's that kind of deal. Definitely gets in the way of the coalition building. I wonder how much there is a desire for coalition building to begin with, like on principle, right? Because if there is an overriding desire to treat the online left as a purely social space, that definitely gets in the way of, I guess, the sacrifices that have to be made to coalition build at all, right? Like a person on first principles wouldn't even be pushing for that. Not on first principles. That's not the right use of the term. But they wouldn't even be pushing for that to begin with, because
Mhm.
they're just trying to like maintain and cultivate a nice social space. So yeah, I don't know. I don't want to be doomer about it. I actually feel pretty good right now with regards to like the future of doing stuff on the left. I'm just hoping that there's some kind of progress there.
Yeah, and I think any sort of speculation or anticipation in terms of how much people genuinely want to coalition build is kind of not really worth it. Like it's the simple answer is like, well, why don't we just like find out? Like if you honestly want to, if there's certain actors in the space that genuinely want to coalition build, and you are being transparent in your actions and what you're talking about and what you're focused on, that should play out, and your like audience expectations and so forth shouldn't have too much of a say if that's your main goal. If your main goal is to, make a certain amount of money, drive clicks, engagement, like you have to weigh it, because I mean at the end of the day you need to sustain your platform. But it does seem to, at least in my mind, or in my observations, that seems to kind of triumph over any real uh, kind of transparency or just people acting honestly. um I don't know if that made sense.
No, no, it does fully, yeah.
Yeah.
And another big difficulty being, of course, that it can be sometimes pretty difficult, I feel, to balance the uh desire to coalition build with the desire to engage in internal critique. There's a lot of really dumb shit that gets said in the online left. And I feel like it's worthwhile to push back against it sometimes. So doing that while maintaining like a generally positive attitude, that's pretty tough. People take stuff real personal. You don't. Clearly, you're willing to talk to me, and I was quite mean to you, which I appreciate very much. By the way, I'd like to believe that if the situation had been perfectly reversed, and you had done as I had done, and so on and so forth, that I would be the same. But I still think it speaks to a strength of character. I do appreciate you talking to me very much.
Yeah, no, I mean, it would have been hypocritical for me to criticize, the deference politics and online drama, and then have some sort of ego regarding how my own content was reacted to. I saw it as more of like a fruitful opportunity to actually talk to other people in this space, and I'm talking to quite a few different people now, to kind of get a better picture of a discussion that I think is actually really important in online left spaces, which is, to what extent is all of this activity, all of this content creation placating or energizing real political action. And I think this is, at least for me and my platform, that's a really important question to raise. And I think that it is a discourse that is most fruitful when you're talking to other people in the space, and you're not just like a myopic and you know critiquing from a distance and making video essays from a distance. I think it's like an active dialogue.
No, I fully agree. Yeah, I appreciate you coming on very much and talking. I feel like I have a therapy dumped. I've trauma dumped at you a little bit. So I
Just
apologize
yeah.
for that, but
No, no, no. That's exactly what I wanted. Actually, that's great. And I hope if this discussion in some way encouraged you to, at least regardless of expectations, and privately or publicly, to maybe reach out to certain people, or at least attempt to um, coalition build, despite the possibility that maybe nobody really wants to coalition build online. I hope that at least, maybe there was some seed planted, I guess, for me, because I would like to see that. Like, you're very articulate, and you have a very effective voice in this space, and you have quite a mobilized audience in a lot of ways, and it would be fruitful, I think, in terms of online left leaning spaces, if there was some more unity.
no, fully. And there's a remarkable amount that can be done as well. I mean, to speak specifically on the good done with the canvassing folks, the special election that was held in, is it Michigan or Wisconsin? They're the same state in my mind. There was a special election that was held where it's essentially mathematically certain that the contributions of the canvassing group Progressive Victory cinched it. Like they were the ones that did it. Was Wisconsin? Okay, they say Wisconsin in chat. I always forget. I'll never remember the difference between those two states. Midwest is Midwest. Anyway, there's that business in Georgia. The right has always suffered when it comes to their ground game because the right's primary voting demographic is like geriatrics, you know? And they also don't believe in like civil society as a concept, really. Conservatives wake up every day and plan which guns they're going to concealed carry on their trip to Walmart because they genuinely believe they're going to get jumped by like Libyan kidnappers the moment they leave the car. These are not people who are very good at doing stuff like canvassing or phone banking for that matter. They don't believe in each other. They're too like psychotically individualist. So, we have an advantage in that game. We have an advantage in crowd fundraising. Like Bernie Sanders managed to make a ton of money off of that. There's so much good we can do. So yeah, I don't know. I'm optimistic towards it, and hopefully in the near future, a chance to demonstrate those chops comes up.
Mhm. Great. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I guess we talked for about an hour, so I'll let you go back to your show, your stream.
The ADHD riddled audience that I peddled in usually keeps things to around an hour before they go for their
That's
vapes or
fair.
whatever. No, stream's over. It's time for me to do the thing I lie to my chat and say I don't, which is play 8 uninterrupted hours of video games while explaining to people that I missed their emails because I was busy with work. It's been a delight
That's
having
fair.
you on.
Yeah.
I hope we can talk again in the
Yeah, me
future.
too. Yeah, for sure. All
All
right.
right,
Take
be well.
care.
Okay, come on. That was pretty nice, huh? I didn't expect any of that. I think that was pretty nice, personally. Yeah, I didn't expect that at all. Perhaps we were too harsh. This is my fault, not yours. I think like I said, it's a presumption that all engagements are going to be antagonistic guarantees as such. Now, I still maintain, and I do firmly believe this, in essentially every case where a bridge has burned with me and another person on the left, it was their fault, not mine. I really mean that. You can like, I know it's like one of those look for the pattern kind of deals, but genuinely in like the bit by bit, if you look at the details of these engagements, I genuinely think with a lot of these people, Contra, whatever else, we're like, like everyone says with like Professor Flowers that like, oh well, I did this. I don't know, man. I feel like it was actually just a 3 hour convo of me being really nice and also like incredulously asking, so you really don't think it would be up to deport 6 million white South Africans? And she's like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know. I feel I don't think I caused this, but I will say this much. If Sisyphus had never wanted to talk to me, or if there had been some kind of like mutual antagonism that had persisted after this, as a product of me watching his video, that would have been my fault, right? Because his video, even though I take issue with parts of it, his video would have been earnest and well intended, and I would have like watched it real fucking aggro, like, like, oh, another one of these videos, and then like if he didn't want to talk to me, in my mind it'd be like, oh well, there's another connection that I don't have. But that would have been on me. That would have been a me thing. Even if I disagree with the video, that's not an excuse to like, you know, justify limitless antagonism or like fuck up any personal engagement or whatever. So that's on me. I wanna go back to being a bit of a positive example. This fits back into the idea, the big pants arc. Big pants, I got to get better about that.